So this is a sheep brain, and we have the cerebrum, which wraps around the brain. It's in charge of conscious thoughts, awareness, higher functions, and motor and sensory. It's divided by the longitudinal fissure into a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. The right hemisphere is in charge of art, music, imagination, emotion, and the left side's senses and motor. And the left hemisphere is in charge of language, logic, math, and the right side's senses and motor. The hemispheres are connected by the corpus callosum right here, which is in charge of communication between the left and right sides of the brain. And then the frontal lobe up here is in charge of judgment, personality, motivation, and voluntary motor movements. The parietal lobe right here is in charge of sensory areas and some speech and understanding. The temporal lobe on the sides is in charge of auditory and olfactory. And the occipital lobe in the back is in charge of visual. The cerebral cortex is the outer gray matter in the cerebrum. It's in charge of association, thinking, and the cerebellum, the small brain in the back, is in the reflex center for unconscious motor function, and it maintains posture and balance. The arbor vitae are inside the cerebellum, and they're in charge of sensory and motor info to and from the cerebellum. The brainstem, coming off here, holds the processing centers for many autonomic behaviors and reflexes, and it's a relay center between the cerebellum and spinal cord and cerebrum. And the brainstem is continuous with the spinal cord, which would come off like this. The pons is the bulge of the brainstem, and it's the bridge between the cerebellum, the spinal cord, and the higher brain areas. It relays info between the motor cortex and the cerebellum, and works with the medulla, which is down here, to help regulate breathing, and info is stored in the pons before being stored in the long-term memory. The medulla, which is below it, is the most inferior part of the brainstem, and it's in charge of coordination of reflexes, both vital and non-vital. And the vital is like heart rate and respiration, and non-vital is like coughing and swallowing and stuff like that. And it also maintains a state of consciousness. Ventricles are cavities in the brain that contain cerebrospinal fluid, like the lateral ventricle here, which is large and C-shaped, the third ventricle, which is under the corpus callosum, right here, and the fourth ventricle, which is anterior to the cerebellum here. The brain has gray matter and white matter, like gray matter right here and white matter here, and the white matter is myelinated, has myelinated fibers. The pineal gland is right here, and it's pine cone shaped. It secretes the hormone melatonin, which regulates your sleep-wake cycle. And the thalamus is here. It is in charge of relay and processing of sensory info, and it acts as a filter, so it passes on only some of this sensory info. The hypothalamus is below the thalamus, and it is a major homeostasis center and directs drives such as rage and fear of the body, and it controls your circadian rhythm, and it links the nervous and endocrine systems. The olfactory bulbs are right here, and they receive neural input about odors detected by cells in the nasal cavity. The olfactory tracts are here, and they connect the bulbs to regions of the brain. The optic chiasma is X-shaped right here. It's formed by the crossing of the optic nerves, and the optic nerves, which would come off, they connect the brain to the eyes. The infundibulum is the hole right back here near the optic chiasma. The pituitary gland would come off around here, but it was taken off with the dura mater. It's part of the endocrine system, and it secretes hormones into the bloodstream. The corpora quadrimina is back here. It's kind of butt-shaped, and it is made of 4 caliculi. It's the 2 inferior and the 2 superior, and it's in charge of reflexive actions. And lastly, the central canal would go down through the length of the spinal cord, and it holds the cerebrospinal fluid.